Lacey Mitchell stood by the shimmering portal, waiting with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The air hummed with energy as the gateway between worlds activated, casting an otherworldly glow. Finally, the portal dimmed, revealing Lyora, the first alien ambassador from Zephyria. Her silver-tinted skin and wide, curious eyes immediately set her apart in the bustling city. "Welcome to Earth, Lyora," Lacey said warmly, extending his hand. "I'm Lacey, your guide." Lyora stepped forward, her eyes darting around, taking in the neon lights, the throngs of people, and the cacophony of city sounds. "Thank you, Lacey," she replied, her voice soft yet tinged with awe. "It's so different from Zephyria." Lacey smiled, leading her through the crowded streets. "I can imagine. Earth can be overwhelming at first, but you'll get used to it." He pointed out various landmarks, trying to ease her into the chaotic atmosphere. The city's energy was palpable, a stark contrast to the serene, technologically advanced world Lyora had described during their briefings. As they walked, they entered a city park where children played, their laughter echoing through the air. It seemed to calm Lyora, but then she overheard a group of kids whispering. "Did you hear about the Grim Reaper?" a boy said, his eyes wide with fear. "They say it takes souls at night." Lyora froze, her eyes widening in terror. "Grim Reaper?" she whispered to Lacey, her voice trembling. "What is that?" Lacey glanced at the children and sighed, sensing her growing unease. "It's just a story humans tell to cope with the concept of death. The Grim Reaper is a mythical figure, nothing more." But Lyora's fear was evident. She clutched Lacey's arm tightly, her gaze darting around, as if expecting the Grim Reaper to appear any moment. Lacey gently led her away from the children, trying to distract her with more sights and sounds of the city. Despite his efforts, he could see the fear had taken root. That night, Lacey escorted Lyora to her temporary residence, a quiet apartment on the edge of the city. "Try to get some rest," he advised. "Tomorrow we'll explore more peaceful parts of Earth." Lyora nodded, but as soon as Lacey left, she found herself alone with her thoughts. The city, which had been merely overwhelming during the day, now felt menacing in the darkness. Every creak of the building, every rustle of leaves outside her window, amplified her fear. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the children's words. Suddenly, she heard a noise outside her window. Her heart raced as she got up and peered into the darkness. The outline of trees swayed in the wind, casting eerie shadows. Was it the Grim Reaper? She clutched her blanket tightly, her eyes wide with terror. It took hours for exhaustion to finally pull her into a restless sleep. The next morning, Lacey found Lyora looking pale and tired. "Rough night?" he asked gently. Lyora nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't stop thinking about the Grim Reaper. What if it's real, Lacey? What if it comes for me?" Lacey placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I promise you, Lyora, it's just a story. Today, I'll show you a place that's calm and serene, far from the noise and chaos of the city. Maybe it will help ease your mind." Lacey decided to take Lyora to Bluewood Forest, a place known for its tranquility. As they drove out of the city, the landscape gradually changed from concrete and steel to lush greenery. Lyora seemed to relax, the tension in her shoulders easing as they neared the forest. Bluewood Forest was a haven of peace. Tall trees stretched towards the sky, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. Birds sang sweetly, and the scent of pine filled the air. "Welcome to Bluewood Forest," Lacey said as they walked along a winding path. "It's one of my favorite places on Earth." Lyora looked around, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So different from the city." They walked in silence for a while, the peaceful surroundings a stark contrast to the chaos of the city. Lacey hoped the forest would help Lyora find some peace and start to understand that Earth's legends, like the Grim Reaper, were not to be taken literally. As they explored, Lachi explained more about human culture and the stories that shaped it. He told her about how humans used myths to make sense of the unknown, to cope with fears they couldn't explain. Leora listened intently, her fear slowly giving way to curiosity. They found a quiet spot by a bubbling brook and sat down. Lachi could see the wheels turning in Leora's mind as she processed everything he had told her. "I understand that stories are important," she said finally, "but it's hard to let go of the fear they can create." Lachi nodded. "I know. But remember, you're here to learn and experience new things. Fear is natural, but it doesn't have to control you." Leora gave a small smile, feeling a bit more at ease. "Thank you, Lachi. I'll try to remember that." As they arrived back in the city, Leora glanced out the car window and saw a shadowy figure standing under a streetlight, watching them. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it the Grim Reaper or just a trick of the light? Leora's days on Earth had become a jumble of anxiety and discomfort. Every sudden noise made her jump, every shadow seemed ominous, and her sleep was plagued with restless thoughts of the Grim Reaper. Lachi, noticing her escalating distress, decided it was time to change their environment. "Let's visit Bluewood Forest," Lachi suggested one morning over breakfast. His tone was gentle but firm, indicating that this wasn't merely a suggestion, but a necessary diversion. "It's peaceful there, a perfect place to clear your mind." Leora nodded, appreciating the initiative. The idea of escaping the city's chaotic energy was appealing. They set off shortly after, leaving behind the concrete jungle for the verdant serenity of the forest. As they walked, the cacophony of urban life gradually faded, replaced by the melodic whispers of nature. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting dancing patterns on the forest floor. The air was fresh, filled with the earthy scent of pine and soil, a stark contrast to the artificial smells of the city. "Welcome to Bluewood Forest," Lachi said, his voice breaking the tranquil silence. "This place is special. It has a way of calming the mind and spirit." Leora took in her surroundings, her anxiety ebbing slightly with each step. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle rustling of leaves. As they ventured deeper, they encountered an elderly man with a weathered face and a twinkle of curiosity in his eyes. He approached them with a steady gait, leaning slightly on a wooden cane. "So, this is the alien everyone's been talking about," he said, his voice rich with a blend of skepticism and intrigue. "Welcome to Earth. I'm Marcus." Leora managed a small smile. "Thank you. It's nice to meet you. Marcus, this is Leora. She's been troubled by stories of the Grim Reaper," Lachi explained. "I thought some peace and quiet might help her." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Ah, the Grim Reaper. That old spectre. You know, even humans have fears, Leora. When I was a child, I believed the Grim Reaper lurked in these woods. Every rustle in the leaves felt like a harbinger of death." Leora listened intently, her fear still present, but mingled now with curiosity. "And how did you overcome that fear?" she asked, her voice soft but eager. Marcus chuckled softly, the sound resonating through the quiet forest. "By learning. By understanding that the Grim Reaper was just a story, a way for us to make sense of something as complex and mysterious as death." They continued their walk, Marcus leading the way with surprising agility for his age. He shared tales of his childhood, of nights spent fearing the unseen, and the gradual realization that those fears were unfounded. His words, though simple, carried the weight of lived experience. That evening, they settled by a campfire, the flickering flames casting warm, dancing shadows around them. The forest, usually bustling with the sounds of wildlife, seemed to hold its breath, as if paying respect to the stories being told. "I remember one night," Marcus began, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "I heard a noise just like tonight. I was convinced it was the Grim Reaper coming for me. But it turned out to be just the wind, rustling through the leaves. Fear can do that, make us see danger where there is none. Leora shivered slightly, not from the cold, but from the resonance of Marcus's words. On Zephyria, we don't have stories like that, she said. We live in harmony, without the concept of death as you know it. Marcus nodded, his expression one of understanding. That's what makes Earth unique, Leora. Our stories, our fears, they're a part of who we are. They teach us, challenge us, and in the end, they help us grow. Leishi, who had been listening quietly, added, Leora, it's important to remember that these stories are just one way humans cope with the unknown. The Grim Reaper is not a real entity, just a symbol of our fears. As the fire crackled, a sudden rustling in the bushes nearby made Leora jump. Her heart raced, the fear spiking once more. She clutched Lachi's arm, her eyes wide with alarm. What was that? She whispered, her voice trembling. Probably just an animal, Lachi reassured her, his hand gently patting hers. The forest is full of life. There's nothing to be afraid of. Marcus leaned back, his eyes scanning the darkened woods. The forest has its own stories, Leora. But none of them include the Grim Reaper. It's just a place where life thrives in its own chaotic beauty. Leora took a deep breath, willing herself to relax. The night was still, the only sounds being the crackle of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl. She realized that she was starting to see the wisdom in Marcus's words, to understand that her fear, while real, was based on a misunderstanding. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, the tension easing into a companionable silence. Leora found herself growing more comfortable, the fear that had gripped her so tightly, beginning to loosen its hold. The peacefulness of the forest, coupled with the warmth of the fire and the company of her new friends, created a sense of safety and understanding. The ruins of Solace stood majestic and ancient, an ethereal testament to Earth's rich and complex history. As Leichi and Leora approached, the towering columns loomed above, adorned with intricate carvings that whispered tales of bygone eras. The air was thick with the scent of moss and ancient stone, creating a serene yet solemn atmosphere. These ruins are older than most of the cities we've seen, Leichi explained, guiding Leora through the crumbling archway. They've been a place of ritual and remembrance for centuries. Leora's eyes widened as she took in the carvings, her fingers tracing the delicate lines etched into the stone. It's beautiful and haunting, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. They walked deeper into the ruins, the echo of their footsteps mingling with the distant sound of chanting. A group of people had gathered in the central courtyard, their voices rising and falling in a melodic cadence as they performed a ritual. Leishi led Leora closer, but not so close as to intrude. They're honoring their ancestors, Leishi explained quietly. This ceremony is about remembering and celebrating those who have passed on. Leora watched intently, her eyes following the graceful movements of the participants. They placed offerings of flowers and candles at the base of a grand, ancient statue. The statue depicted a robed figure with outstretched arms, a symbol of both guardianship and farewell. This is incredible, Leora murmured. We don't have anything like this on Zephyria. Death is an unknown concept to us. Marcus joined them, his expression thoughtful. Death is a part of life here, he said, his voice gentle. It's not something we fear, but something we learn to understand and respect. Leora nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of his words. The ceremony continued, and as the chanting reached a crescendo, a sense of calm settled over her. The atmosphere was both reverent and comforting, a stark contrast to the fear that had gripped her since hearing about the Grim Reaper. Leichi smiled, proud of Leora's courage. We'll help you every step of the way, he promised. There's so much more to see and learn. As they continued to explore the ruins, Lachi pointed out various symbols and artifacts. Each one told a story, revealing the depth of human history and their relationship with life and death. Leora listened attentively, her fear gradually transforming into curiosity and respect. Humans have such a profound way of connecting with their past, Lyora observed. These rituals and stories, they keep the memories of the deceased alive. Yes, Lechi agreed. It's our way of ensuring that those who have passed are never truly gone. Their stories live on through us. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the ruins. Lyora felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since arriving on Earth. The fear of the Grim Reaper, the mythical being that had haunted her thoughts, was slowly being replaced by an understanding of human culture and its complexities. As they prepared to leave, Marcus shared one last thought. Remember, Lyora, fear is natural, but it's our response to fear that defines us. By seeking understanding, you're already on the path to overcoming it. Lyora smiled, feeling a newfound resolve. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Lechi. I'm ready to continue this journey and learn all I can. Lyora stood at the edge of Bluewood Forest, her heart pounding. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy, casting long shadows on the ground. She took a deep breath, her resolve firm. Today, she would confront her fear head-on. Lyora, are you ready? Lechi asked, standing beside her. His tone was gentle but encouraging. Yes, she replied, her voice steady. I need to understand this fear. They ventured into the forest, the path narrowing as they went deeper. The sounds of the city faded away, replaced by the whispers of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. The deeper they went, the denser the forest became, and the light grew dimmer. Why are we going so deep into the forest? Lyora asked, a hint of nervousness creeping into her voice. This is where the legends of the Grim Reaper are strongest, Lechi explained. I believe facing the heart of the myth will help you understand it better. They walked in silence for a while, the forest enveloping them in its ancient embrace. The air grew cooler, and a sense of mystery pervaded the atmosphere. Lyora glanced around, her eyes catching glimpses of ancient symbols carved into the trees and stones. These symbols, Lyora began, what do they mean? They're part of our history, Lechi said. They represent human fears and beliefs about death. These carvings were made by our ancestors, trying to make sense of the unknown. Lyora traced her fingers over a carved figure of a cloaked being with a scythe. The Grim Reaper, she whispered, recognizing the symbol. Yes, Lechi confirmed. It's a manifestation of our fear of death, but it's also a symbol of the natural cycle of life. As they continued, they stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood an old stone altar, covered in moss and vines. Ancient runes adorned its surface, telling stories of life, death, and rebirth. This is the heart of the myth, Lechi said. It's where many of the legends originate. Lyora approached the altar, her steps slow and deliberate. She could feel the weight of history around her, the echoes of countless stories and fears. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Do you feel it? Lechi asked, stepping beside her. I feel a presence, Lyora admitted. But it's not threatening. It's more sorrowful. That's the essence of the Grim Reaper, Lechi said. It's not about fear. It's about understanding the sorrow and beauty of life cycle. Suddenly, a rustling in the bushes made them both turn. A figure emerged, cloaked in shadow, moving with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. Lyora's heart leapt into her throat, but she forced herself to stand her ground. Who are you? Lechi called out, his voice steady. The figure stepped into the light, revealing an elderly woman with kind eyes and a serene smile. I am the storyteller, she said. I keep the old tales alive. Lyora relaxed slightly, her fear giving way to curiosity. Why do you tell these stories? She asked. Stories are how we understand the world, the woman replied. The Grim Reaper is a way for us to confront our fears and find peace. The woman gestured for them to sit, and they gathered around the stone altar. She began to weave a tale, her voice soft and melodic. She spoke of ancient times, of humans grappling with the mysteries of life and death. She described how the Grim Reaper became a symbol of that struggle, a figure that embodied both fear and acceptance. As the storyteller spoke, Leora felt a shift within her. The Grim Reaper, once a figure of terror, was now a part of a larger narrative, a way for humans to cope with the inevitability of death. "We fear what we don't understand," the storyteller concluded, "but through stories, we find meaning and solace." Leora nodded, her heart lighter. "I think I understand now," she said. "The Grim Reaper isn't a monster. It's a symbol of life's cycle." Lacey smiled, proud of her realization. "You've come a long way, Leora." The storyteller rose, her eyes twinkling. "Remember, fear is only as powerful as we allow it to be. Understanding diminishes its hold." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the forest, Leora felt a sense of peace. The journey had been challenging, but she had faced her fear and come out stronger. "Thank you," Leora said to the storyteller. "Your tales have helped me see things differently." The woman nodded. "Keep the stories alive, Leora. They are bridges between our worlds." As they made their way back through the forest, Lachie turned to Leora. "How do you feel?" "Better," she replied. "More connected to this world and its people. The fear is still there, but it's manageable. It's part of the journey." Lachie placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "That's all we can hope for, to understand and grow." They walked on, the forest gradually giving way to the familiar sights and sounds of the city. Leora looked back one last time, the ancient symbols and the storyteller's words etched in her mind. The morning mist clung to the bluewood forest as Lachie, Leora, and Marcus made their way deeper into the woods. The air was crisp, carrying the fresh scent of pine and earth. Leora's silver skin shimmered faintly in the dawn light, a stark contrast to the vibrant greens around her. Leora felt a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. She had come a long way from the terrified alien who first arrived on Earth. The stories of the Grim Reaper no longer haunted her as they once did, thanks to the support and understanding from her new friends. Marcus, ever the storyteller, had a plan for today. He wanted to take them to a secluded glade where ancient symbols and artifacts were said to reside. "This place holds the essence of our ancestors' beliefs," Marcus explained as they walked. "It might give you a deeper insight into how humans view life and death." Lachie nodded, appreciating Marcus's initiative. He had seen Leora grow more confident each day, but this journey felt like it would be a final piece in her understanding. As they entered the glade, the sight took Leora's breath away. Stone pillars adorned with intricate carvings rose from the ground, depicting scenes of life, death, and rebirth. The carvings were ancient, yet they seemed to pulse with a timeless energy. "This is beautiful," Leora whispered, stepping closer to one of the pillars. She traced her fingers over the carvings, feeling the stories etched in stone. Marcus began to explain. "These pillars were created by our ancestors to represent the cycle of life. Each carving tells a story of a journey from birth to death, and the belief in something beyond." Leora listened intently, her previous fears now replaced by a profound respect for these human traditions. "I see now," she said softly, "that death is not an end, but a transition, a part of a larger journey." Lacey placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Exactly, Leora. It's something that every culture grapples with in its own way. For humans, it's about finding meaning and comfort in the unknown." Marcus nodded, adding, "And these stories, while sometimes frightening, are also meant to remind us to live fully, to cherish the moments we have." A rustle in the bushes caught their attention. Leora tensed for a moment, but relaxed when a man stepped out into the clearing. He was tall, with a calm demeanor and eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 stories. "Who are you?" Leora asked, intrigued by his sudden appearance. The man smiled. "I am Elias, a storyteller. I come here often to connect with the past and share these tales with those who seek understanding. Lechi greeted him warmly. Elias, we were just discussing the significance of these pillars. Perhaps you could share one of your stories. Elias nodded. Of course. He led them to a circle of stones, where they all sat down. Clearing his throat, he began, long ago, before the dawn of our civilization, there was a belief in a guardian who watched over the souls of the departed. This guardian was both feared and revered, known as the Grim Reaper. Leora leaned in, captivated. Elias continued, but the Grim Reaper was not a harbinger of doom. Instead, it was a guide, leading souls safely to the next realm. This story was passed down to remind people that death, while mysterious, was not something to fear. As Elias spoke, Leora felt a sense of peace. The story resonated deeply, transforming her previous fear into a profound understanding. She realized that the Grim Reaper was not a monster, but a symbol created to help people cope with the inevitable journey of life and death. When Elias finished, there was a reflective silence. Leora broke it, her voice steady. Thank you, Elias. Your story has given me a new perspective. I no longer fear the Grim Reaper. I see it now as a part of life's cycle, something that connects us all. Marcus smiled, pride evident in his eyes. You've come a long way, Leora. Understanding and empathy bridge worlds. Lechi added, and those bridges are what make these exchanges so valuable. We learn from each other, grow, and become better for it. Elias stood, extending his hand to Leora. It's a privilege to share these stories. Remember them and let them guide you. Leora shook his hand, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. I will, Elias. Thank you. As they made their way back through the forest, the sun began to rise, casting golden light through the trees. Leora felt a sense of closure and new beginnings. She was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge and understanding she had gained. Back in the city, Lechi, Leora, and Marcus sat by a campfire, sharing stories and reflecting on their journey. Leora felt a strong connection to her new friends and a deep appreciation for the lessons she had learned. We've all grown from this experience, Lechi said, looking at Leora and Marcus. And that's the true value of our time together. Marcus nodded. To new beginnings and endless stories.